while the customary law, which is trusted by the local people, have a real vitality on the ground. The people adhere spontaneously to those customary land laws. Another dimension of the legal pluralism is uncertainty in land tenure. In most cases, it's difficult to know which law is applicable to a piece of land. Is it the statutory law, or is it the customary law, or is it another system, a local practice, for example? In the field of land dispute resolution, the local communities are usually reluctant to bringing cases before competent courts. If we know that local customary systems are still really observed on the ground, it also has negative implications when it comes to discriminating against women's land rights or the rights of some of the vulnerable groups. So legal pluralism is a major issue in most of our countries. Another common issue across the continent is state sovereignty over land. Let's explain what the principle of state sovereignty over land is. This principle indicates that the state considers itself as the sole owner of land in a specific country. State is the sole owner of lands. Therefore, people are just allocated use rights. The state of the principle of state sovereignty over land has different modalities according to the countries. Some are really radical in terms of state land sovereignty, while others are trying to be a little bit more balanced. Why is the state sovereignty of land so popular in Africa? It's difficult to really analyze the state sovereignty of land, but we know that it's a legacy of the colonial system. The colonial system established the principle of state sovereignty over land in order to quickly develop the colonial state land domain. So, as we already said, the colonial land administration agencies consider that any land which is not represented by a land title has to be included in the state land domain. So it's really one of the historical basis for the state sovereignty over land. I can also say that when you look at the continent, the state sovereignty over land is really dominant in quite all countries which gained independence through armed struggles. This is the case, for example, for Algeria, Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique, and others. Maybe because those countries suffer to gain control over their land resources and consider that it's important that the state keeps sovereignty over the land. It's part of political sovereignty, if you want. Most post-independent African states also decided to go towards state sovereignty over land because they consider that the government is best placed to promote the development of the land, specifically agricultural development. But in practice, we can see that despite state ownership over African lands, most land remain underdeveloped, meaning that the state was owning the land but was not either able to get the land developed. We can also see that in practice, the state ownership over land has facilitated land grabbing by the elites and foreign companies. So it's an issue of discussion, but this is a fact that it's a very, very popular principle across continent. Another common issue is the non-recognition of legitimate customary land rights. I think that we touched already on that. In general, there were a negative perception of customary land rights, starting from the colonial system. For example, it's considered that customary land rights are oral land rights, and therefore they are difficult to understand and to implement. Another element which brought a negative perception of customary land rights is the diversity of customary systems. Within the same country, customary land systems are so diverse, so it was considered as difficult then to understand and to implement at national level. Some other authors also consider that customary land system ignore private property, so it was not possible for them to envisage confirming or recognizing customary land systems because they wanted to develop private property. They also consider that customary land systems brings tenure and security as there is no land title issued to the landowner. However, there is a trend of recognition of customary land rights in recent land reforms. At international level, like for example, the voluntary guidelines, you have the principle, the acknowledgement of the principle of legitimate land rights. Land rights are to be recognized and protected. Legitimate land rights are to be recognized and protected. However, there is no clear definition of what legitimate land rights are. Recognition of legitimate land rights, we have examples in countries like Niger, Uganda, Mali, and so on. So the new land policy reforms are really moving toward the recognition of customary land rights of the people, individual land rights as well as collective land rights. However, the recognition and protection of customary land rights remain a major challenge. There is poor definition and implementation of adequate certification mechanisms. How do we do that? Poor definition of the mechanisms which will lead to recognizing the land rights. There is also difficulties in taking into consideration collective land rights. In most cases, the land systems are developed to recognize individual land rights. When it comes to collective land rights, they are really not familiar to that. That's why there is very, very limited results in terms of recognition of customary land rights on the ground. Another common issue across the continent is the marginalization against women's land rights. Most African societies are dominated by patriarchal systems. Patriarchal societies are based on fathers' lineage. As a result, power and property is kept in the hands of the male members of the society. However, we know that there are many matriarchal societies across Africa. For example, the Ashanti of Ghana, the Berbers of Algeria, the Bakuba of Congo, the Hereros from Namibia, or the Kush of Sudan are matriarchal societies. But let's just keep in mind that the majority of societies are based on patriarchal systems. The systems of patriarchy discriminate against women's land rights. Usually, women are excluded from inheritance of land. They cannot own land by themselves. Women cannot own land by themselves. They have limited access to land, although they have some kind of access through the husband or the male members of their families. So, across the continent, we have a persisting marginalization of women's rights to land, based on the persistence of customary systems and practices, but also based on certain modern laws which are perpetuating gender inequalities. For example, family laws can perpetuate gender inequalities. Inheritance modern laws can also perpetuate gender inequalities. Let's not forget that some other ethnic groups or social groups are also marginalized in our societies. Another common issue is the outdated and weak land administration systems. Most land administration systems are still paper-based systems. There are systems which are operated manually. Those systems allow poor tracking of land transactions, meaning that the system will be outdated very quickly. Citizens have limited access to land information. There is limited human and financial capacity in managing the existing land administration systems. And also those systems, the existing systems, provide poor efficiency of land delivery services. Existing land administration systems are also known to be governed by lengthy procedures and very costly procedures. Here you can see typical land administration system in Africa. You see how the files are still paper managed. You see how it can be difficult to find an information, land information for a citizen. And you can also see the risks of such manually paper-based land administration systems. In case of fire, all these documents might be lost forever, or in case of flood, all this information might be also lost. So it's really systems which are outdated and difficult to manage effectively. So the list of common issues is so large, we cannot go into details for all of them, but let's just list some additional issues which are common. We have the issue of large-scale land-based investment. The whole continent is concerned by this issue. You have issues related to rapid demographic growth. The whole continent is at growth, especially in urban areas. You have the issue of corruption and transparency in the land sector. Most land policies are not effective in the continent across countries. Even when you have good land policies which have been developed, on the ground they are not effective. Urban development and land is a common issue across the continent. So these are some additional issues that we could look, and it's not all issues which have been captured here. Let me now move to regional specificities. Some of the factors behind regional specificities include common historical, cultural, and political background. Take a region like Southern Africa. Southern Africa has experienced the apartheid system, and it has shaped the land issues in the region. If you take Eastern Africa, the investment specifically in the area of tourism, parks, have also shaped land issues in this region. Let's look at Central Africa. The existence of forests and mining activities has shaped land issues in this region. In West Africa, we can say that pastoralism is a very important activity, and it has also shaped the land issues in the region. In Northern Africa, the religious factor has been critical. We know that it's in this region that the Sharia law is being implemented in the land sector. We also have issue of water scarcity in this region, which has influenced the specificity of land issues. Let's also consider that linguistic clusters also convey legal traditions. You know that the linguistic clusters have been organized around the colonial powers. In West Africa and Central Africa, these are Francophone clusters, and they are mainly governed by the civil law system. In Southern and Eastern Africa, which are Anglophone countries, they have been also influenced by the system of common law. In Northern Africa, most of them are Arabophone countries, and the Sharia law war has also influenced the land issues. We have other linguistic clusters, such as the Lusophone, the Spanish, and the Italian, which might have also influenced part of the land issues in the concerned countries and regions. Here you have a map with the linguistic influence, the colonial linguistic influence. To go very quickly, you can see that all in red is from British linguistic influence, and what is in blue is from French linguistic influence. So the legal traditions conveyed by those linguistic influences are also important to take into consideration. You have some other linguistic influences like the Portuguese, which are quite limited, or the Spanish influence, which is really, really marginal, I would say. In the northern part of Africa, the influence is mainly Arabophone. Arabic is of high influence. Some countries use the Arabic language as official language, while others are using it as co-official language. So you can see that those using Arabic as official language include different countries such as Mauritania, Egypt, and others. But many other countries just use it as co-official language. All those countries using Arabic and being influenced by the Sharia law, partly or fully, include Mauritania, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Sudan, Somalia, and Chad. Let me look at the different regions now. I'm starting with Southern Africa. The key issue in Southern Africa is about redressing the historical injustices through land redistribution. In Southern Africa, we had different colonial rulers, including the British, the German, the Portuguese, and surprisingly, we also had South Africa, as South Africa has colonized Namibia. The apartheid political system was the dominant system in the whole region. It's a political system which is based on racial discrimination and ranking, and which was clearly inspired by the Nazi ideology. In South Africa, for example, one key law is the Native Law, the Native Land Act of 1913, which resulted in forced transfer of community land to white settlers. At the end of the apartheid system, 87% of the land were held by 10% of the population of white settlers. In some countries, you even had genocide based on land issues. One important example is the genocide of the Hereros in 1904 1904, and the genocide of the Namas in 1908, both in Namibia. Meaning that these are issues of high importance. The historical injustice is of high importance in this region. You cannot talk about land policy processes if you ignore the issue of redressing historical injustice. Therefore, in South Africa, for example, redressing the historical injustice has been at the heart of the post-apartheid system and regime. There were huge expectations of the Black people, and the ANC government had no other option than launching the land reform. The land reform in South Africa had two key objectives. First, redressing the historical land injustice, and second, building a new and united nations. Key components of the land reform program in South Africa included the restitution of the land transferred to the white settlers, and the mechanism which was used was the willing seller, willing buyer approach. The land redistribution to redress historical land injustice was the second component. And the ANC government has scheduled that in 5-year times, 30% of the land held by the white farmer had to be transferred to the Black people. And a third component of the South African land reform was the reform of land tenure system in order to secure the land rights of the Black people. Today, the South African government had to acknowledge the failure of the land reform. The system of the willing buyer and willing seller mechanism was too costly and too lengthy to implement. So it contributed to the failure of the land reform program. Recently, the South African government had decided to implement compulsory land acquisition mechanisms. Another issue common to the Southern Africa region is about the HIV. Most people don't discuss the HIV and land issue, while Southern Africa is the epicenter of the HIV pandemic. A country like Swaziland has the highest prevalence rate in the world. 27.4% of the people are identified as HIV prevalent. Some of the land implications include the following. The household's financial resources are diverted from production to healthcare and traditional funerals. Many households had to abandon or sell off their family lands due to the HIV pandemic. And widows and orphans were further vulnerable due to the pandemic of HIV. As I told you, despite all that, there is poor consideration in land reform processes in the region. Let me now look at Eastern Africa. Eastern Africa, the elite capture of land resources is of concern. We can find the root causes of this elite capture in the settler economy of the colonial period, when settlers occupied community lands as a gift to their cronies while keeping the rest for themselves. As a result, local communities were marginalized. The elites who controlled the post-colonial state used their power to grab land for themselves. Established procedures designed to protect public interest were often perverted to serve private and political ends. Widespread corruption in the land sector and impunity for land grabbers is usually highlighted by civil society organizations. As a result, we can see that in this region, few individuals own large tracts of lands. This is the case of Kenya, this is the case of Tanzania and others. Land use issues are also of concern in Eastern Africa. Eastern Africa is a region with significant political instability and conflicts. Let's think of countries like DRC, Burundi, Sudan, Somalia, South Sudan, and others. All those countries experience population displacements and also experience ethnic-based conflicts, including genocides in countries like Rwanda, Burundi, or Sudan. Some of the land issues include the fact that the majority of livestock is managed by transhumant pastoral communities. And this leads to conflicts over competing land uses, pastoralism, conservation, and touristic activities, and others. Conflicts arise also around water use in the region. When we look at Central Africa, we have to think of issues of land, forests, and mining. Let's remember that Central Africa is the region which is hosting the Congo Basin forest. The Congo Basin forest is the second largest rainforest in the world, after Amazonia in Brazil. The Congo Basin forest spans across 6 countries, namely Cameroon, Central African Republic, Democratic Republic of Congo, Republic of Congo, usually called as Congo-Brazzaville, Equatorial Guinea, and Gabon. So it's really a huge forest, and it's extremely rich in wildlife, including gorillas, elephants, and others, and with huge opportunities for tourism. We can also see the importance of this Congo Basin forest if we look at it from the perspective of environmental preservation. The policy of forest concession is very common in Central Africa. Issues include infringement of land rights of local communities, or attempts of concessionaries to grab public land through forest concessions, or rapid land degradation. Sorry. The mining aspect is very, very important in Central Africa. The region is blessed with many mineral resources, including oil, diamond, cobalt, copper, uranium, and others. One very important mineral resource is coltan. You know that coltan is used in mobile phones, in the computer industry, and others. And the Kivu region in the eastern DRC is hosting 60 to 80% of the world reserve of coltan. Some of the implications of the mineral resources, of the wealth in mineral resources, include the following. There is clear links between mineral activities and conflicts in Central Africa. And illegal trafficking of coltan, is at the heart of the war and population displacement in DRC. Look at this map of armed conflicts in the eastern part of DRC. The black points represent mineral extraction activities, and the red points represent conflicts, including armed conflicts. You can see that conflicts are concentrating in areas of mineral extraction. It's really important to keep this in mind when discussing land and mining in Central Africa and specifically in DRC. When I look at West Africa, I would say that West Africa is a big region of mobility, and also a region where there is significant progress in terms of regional integration. The history of mobility in Western Africa is very, very old, before even the colonial period. In the field of agriculture, we have the plantation economy, which has fueled migration. And obviously, we have pastoralism, which is a factor of migration, as people, as pastoralists, are moving across borders with their cattle. Some of the receiving countries in West Africa include mainly Côte d'Ivoire, but also Ghana. More recently, Nigeria was identified as a pole of attraction due to the oil boom. The progress of regional integration has fostered migration flows across borders. In all countries in West Africa, you'll find people migrating from one country to the other due to the facilitation resulting in regional integration, freedom of movement of population, and others. There is high implications in terms of land. For example, in a country like Côte d'Ivoire, you have massive presence of foreigners in rural employment or in ownership of rural land. It can be very surprising, but many landowners in Côte d'Ivoire were foreigners. you have ethnic-based conflicts over access to land, and these conflicts have fueled major regional crises. And again, I'm referring to the Côte d'Ivoire crisis. And we can also identify a tension between principles of regional integration and the national protection of land resources. I would even say the national protectionism of land resources. You know that the principle of regional integration is based on free movement of people, the right of establishment, and others. So people have just been moving, and now some governments, including the government of Côte d'Ivoire, are trying to reverse and imposing that the land has to be owned only by nationals. And this has been one of the factors in the civil war of the years 2000. The second aspect in West Africa is about pastoralism. Pastoralism is a long-standing phenomenon in West Africa. The people, the pastoralists and their cattle are moving across the country and across borders in order to secure access to pasture, to water, and from time to time, they cause damage to culture, and this leads to conflicts. So this happens since generations, I would say. What is new today is that all those situations tend now to get out of control. There is limited capacity of local institutions to manage land-related conflicts. As a result, conflicts are more and more violent, including use of knives and guns. Conflicts are more and more inter-community conflicts instead of being inter-individual conflicts. Some of the causes of those conflicts include the increase of human population and livestock, meaning more pressure on resources. The competing access to pastoral resources, including pasture and water. Also, the disruption of pastoral movements. The challenging of pastoral land rights, or the allocation of pastoral areas to elites or foreign investors. There is one current situation in Nigeria about the RUGA standing for Rural Grazing Areas. This is a program of the Nigerian government, and it has generated a lot of tensions between pastoralists and local agriculturalist farmers. In Northern Africa, we have issues related to land and water. This is really a critical issue. You know that Northern Africa is mainly an arid and semi-arid environment. We have the Sahara Desert, which is an important part of most countries in the region. At the same time, we have a rapidly growing population in the region. And we also have complex legal pluralism background with the Sharia law, the civil law, the local community practices, and others. In Northern Africa, land issues are very complex. You have a diversity of types of rights, which include what is called the milk rights, the collective lands, the guiche lands, the habus lands. You'll read more about those types of rights in the narrative of this session. One critical issue in the region is land fragmentation. The land fragmentation is a result of the continuous subdivision of family lands through inheritance. Land fragmentation is an issue of high concern to policymakers in the region, as it is considered as a major impediment to agricultural development and productivity. It is considered that it prevents economy of scale. An example is that in Tunisia, 54% of farms are smaller than 5 hectares. These are data from 2004, so it might be even less today. Water scarcity is of concern in the region, as we have periodic droughts in the region. The water scarcity is aggravated by rapid urban development, desertification, and climate change. There is increasing risk of water stress. And water stress happens when a country is not able to provide the minimum water supply to satisfy the essential needs of its population. So, Northern Africa often experience water stresses. Irrigation is a very important competitor for water use. Some countries in the region are engaged in large-scale land acquisitions to ensure food security for their own population. And this includes countries like Libya or Egypt. Water is a potential for conflicts in the region. The conflicts can arise between countries around river basins and groundwater aquifers. For example, we know that there is tensions in the region of the Nile Basin, Nubian aquifer. But it's also a source of tensions and conflicts within amongst countries. So amongst countries and within countries, there are tensions around water use. Within countries, you have a competition between agricultural use, meaning irrigation, and urban use, meaning mainly drinking water. But sometimes you have also tension between human use and environmental needs. Here you have a picture of the Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia. I'm sure that all of you heard about the Renaissance Dam, which is a major project and which is creating tensions between Ethiopia and neighboring countries, including Egypt and Sudan. Let me now move to the last part, which is emerging land issues. I want to focus here on a new phenomenon which is related to terrorism in the context of the Sahel region. And these issues raise the issue of land use planning in the region. I think that everybody knows that the Sahel region is experiencing continuous insecurity and destabilization due to terrorist activities. Among key victims, you have the local communities, but you also have the pastoral communities, local pastoral communities, as well as transhumant pastoral communities. Pastoral communities are suffering massacres of families and communities, and also cattle rustling. But at the same time, pastoral communities are requested to justify that they are not colluding with the terrorist groups. When we look at the map in the Sahel region, we can see that terrorist groups benefit from weak state presence on the ground. The terrorist group benefit from weak state presence on the ground. Most Sahelian countries are very large countries with limited state capacities to administer and control the entire territory. As a result, remote pastoral territories are abandoned de facto. This is a huge opportunity for the different terrorist groups to take control of part of the national territory of many countries in order to organize and conduct all kinds of illicit trafficking. This situation raises issues of land use policy. In any country, you need to identify the key resources and identify the key development opportunities in each region. Meaning that we need to identify the regional development potential in each country. Not all regions have the same potential, but each of the regions have specific potentials. Land use planning will guide investment and priority infrastructure in each region. Which infrastructure need to be developed in which region? Which investments need to be developed in which region? These are issues that land use policies are addressing. Through land use policies, the presence of state is better ensured. It can be ensured through decentralization, and it can also be ensured through basic public service delivery. Access to education, access to water, access to health, and others. Land use planning will also lead to equitable development for all. Each region will benefit all the public services that we just mentioned. And each region will also contribute to national development. So we can consider that national land use planning can help mitigate issues related to the development of terrorism in the Sahel region. So this leads me to the end of this presentation on key land issues in Africa. As advised, you absolutely need to read the narratives of the module. And you also have further reading available at the end of the narrative. I'm now waiting to see you for module 3, which will be about best practices in land policy development, implementation, and monitoring. See you for Module 3. Thank you.